George Washington, the first president, led the fledgling nation through its formative years, establishing precedents for the president's role and guiding the drafting of the Constitution. His decision to step down after 2 terms set a vital precedent for peaceful transitions of power in a democratic republic. John Adams, the second president, played a pivotal role in diplomatically resolving the quasi-war with France, avoiding full-scale conflict. His advocacy for the Alien and Sedition Acts, however controversial, reinforced federal authority, but also sparked debates about civil liberties that endure to this day. Thomas Jefferson, the third president, oversaw the Louisiana Purchase, effectively doubling the size of the United States and securing its expansion westward. His emphasis on agrarianism and the ideal of an independent yeoman farmer shaped early American identity and land policies. James Madison, the fourth president, is often called the father of the Constitution for his crucial role in drafting and promoting the document. His presidency was defined by the War of 1812, which, though a mixed outcome, affirmed American sovereignty and solidified the nation's status on the world stage. James Monroe, the fifth president, is best known for the Monroe Doctrine, which asserted American dominance in the Western Hemisphere and opposed European interference in the Americas. This policy laid the groundwork for America's rise as a global power and shaped its foreign relations for decades to come. John Quincy Adams, the sixth president, is remembered for his advocacy for internal improvements such as roads and canals, laying the groundwork for America's infrastructure expansion. He also successfully negotiated the Adams-Onis Treaty, which secured Florida for the United States, further consolidating its territorial growth. Andrew Jackson, the seventh president, is known for his populist policies and his role in expanding suffrage to non-landowners, thus broadening democratic participation. His decisive actions during the nullification crisis reinforced the authority of the federal government and preserved the Union. Martin Van Buren, the eighth president, faced the economic turmoil of the Panic of 1837, but laid the foundation for modern political parties with the creation of the Democratic Party. His advocacy for the independent treasury system set the stage for the modern banking system in the United States. William Henry Harrison, the ninth president, is best known for his exceptionally short presidency lasting only 31 days, but his campaign style set a precedent for future candidates, emphasizing grassroots mobilization and public speaking. John Tyler, the 10th president, faced the challenge of assuming the presidency after Harrison's death and worked to establish the precedent of the vice president succeeding to the presidency upon the president's death. His annexation of Texas significantly expanded the territory of the United States, but also heightened tensions over the issue of slavery. James K. Polk, the 11th president, is remembered for his ambitious agenda, which included the annexation of Texas, the acquisition of California and the Southwest through the Mexican-American War, and the implementation of a low tariff. His administration effectively expanded the territory of the United States to the Pacific Ocean, fulfilling the concept of manifest destiny. Zachary Taylor, the 12th president, was a career military officer known as Old Rough and Ready for his success in the Mexican-American War. His presidency was brief, but his opposition to the extension of slavery into newly acquired territories intensified national debate over the issue. Millard Fillmore, the 13th president, is notable for signing the Compromise of 1850, which attempted to address the contentious issue of slavery by admitting California as a free state while implementing a stricter fugitive slave law. His support for these compromises aimed to preserve the Union, but ultimately exacerbated tensions between North and South. Franklin Pierce, the 14th president, struggled with growing sectional divisions, exemplified by the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which repealed the Missouri Compromise and allowed for popular sovereignty in determining slavery status. His presidency witnessed the escalation of violence in Bleeding Kansas and heightened the path to the Civil War. James Buchanan, the 15th president, faced the daunting challenge of managing the nation during the lead-up to the Civil War. His administration was marked by indecision and failure to effectively address the secession crisis, contributing to the eventual rupture of the Union and the outbreak of the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, is best known for leading the nation through its greatest crisis, the Civil War, and for his role in the abolition of slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation. His leadership preserved the Union and fundamentally transformed America by redefining the nation's commitment to liberty and equality. Andrew Johnson, the 17th president, faced the immense challenge of Reconstruction after the Civil War, implementing policies aimed at reintegrating the Southern states into the Union. Despite his efforts to reconcile the nation, his clashes with Congress over Reconstruction led to his impeachment, making him the first president to undergo such a trial. Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th president, was a celebrated Civil War general whose presidency was marked by efforts to enforce civil rights for African Americans in the South during Reconstruction. His administration also pursued policies to stabilize the economy after the war and combat corruption, although scandals tarnished his reputation. Rutherford B. Hayes, the 19th president, is known for his role in ending Reconstruction through the Compromise of 1877, which removed federal troops from the South and effectively marked the beginning of the Jim Crow era. Despite the controversial circumstances of his election, Hayes worked to reconcile North and South and promote civil service reform. James Garfield, the 20th president, advocated for civil service reform and was a proponent of African American civil rights. His presidency was tragically cut short by assassination, but his death galvanized public support for civil service reform and led to the eventual passage of the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act. Chester A. Arthur, the 21st president, is noted for his commitment to civil service reform, signing the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act into law, which established a merit-based system for federal employment. His administration also saw the modernization of the United States Navy, laying the groundwork for its emergence as a global naval power. Grover Cleveland, the 22nd and 24th president, pursued fiscal conservatism and fought against corruption, earning a reputation for honesty and integrity. His first term was marked by efforts to reduce government spending and vetoing numerous special interest bills, while his second term focused on economic reform amidst a severe financial depression. Benjamin Harrison, the 23rd president, oversaw the passage of the Sherman Antitrust Act, aimed at curbing the power of monopolistic corporations and promoting fair competition. His administration also saw the introduction of federal legislation to protect African American voting rights in the South, though these efforts were largely unsuccessful. Grover Cleveland, in his second non-consecutive term, faced the monumental task of addressing the economic depression of the 1890s, advocating for lower tariffs and government intervention to alleviate economic hardships. His efforts to stabilize the economy and restore public confidence laid the groundwork for future economic recovery. William McKinley, the 25th president, is remembered for his leadership during the Spanish-American War, which resulted in the United States acquiring territories such as Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. His presidency also oversaw significant economic growth, characterized by the expansion of American industry and the implementation of protective tariffs. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president, is known for his progressive agenda, which included trust busting to regulate big business and conservation efforts to preserve natural resources. He also facilitated the construction of the Panama Canal, which transformed global trade and naval strategy. William Howard Taft, the 27th president, continued Roosevelt's trust-busting policies and initiated further antitrust suits against major corporations. He also advocated for dollar diplomacy, using American economic power to influence foreign affairs and promote stability in Latin America and Asia. Woodrow Wilson, the 28th president, is perhaps best known for his leadership during World War I and his efforts to establish the League of Nations, an international organization aimed at preventing future conflicts. He also enacted significant domestic reforms, including the creation of the Federal Reserve System and the implementation of progressive taxation. Warren G. Harding, the 29th president, promoted a return to normalcy after the tumult of World War I, focusing on domestic issues such as economic prosperity and reducing government intervention in business. However, his presidency was marred by scandal, including the infamous Teapot Dome scandal, tarnishing his legacy. Calvin Coolidge, the 30th president, oversaw a period of economic prosperity known as the Roaring Twenties, characterized by rapid industrial growth and consumerism. His conservative economic policies, such as tax cuts and limited government regulation, contributed to this era of prosperity, though they also exacerbated income inequality. Herbert Hoover, the 31st president, assumed office shortly after the onset of the Great Depression, and his administration struggled to effectively address the economic crisis. Despite his efforts to implement relief programs such as the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, his presidency is often criticized for its perceived inaction and failure to stem the tide of the Depression. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 32nd president, is renowned for his New Deal programs, which aimed to alleviate the suffering of the Great Depression through government intervention and social welfare policies. His leadership during World War II, including the implementation of the Lend-Lease program and the formation of the United Nations, cemented his legacy as one of America's greatest presidents. Harry S. Truman, the 33rd president, inherited the presidency following Roosevelt's death and made the controversial decision to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, effectively ending World War II. He also implemented key Cold War policies, such as the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan to contain the spread of communism. Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th president, is known for his leadership during the Cold War and his emphasis on maintaining a strong military deterrent against the Soviet Union. He also presided over a period of economic prosperity and stability known as the Eisenhower era, characterized by suburbanization and the expansion of the middle class. John F. Kennedy, the 35th president, inspired a generation with his vision of progress and hope, epitomized by the space race and his commitment to civil rights. His handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, where he navigated the world away from nuclear war, showcased his skillful crisis management and diplomacy. Lyndon B. Johnson, the 36th president, is remembered for his ambitious domestic agenda, including the passage of landmark civil rights legislation, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. His Great Society programs aim to combat poverty and inequality through initiatives like Medicare and Medicaid, significantly expanding the role of the federal government in social welfare. Richard M. Nixon, the 37th president, pursued a policy of détente with the Soviet Union and opened diplomatic relations with China, easing Cold War tensions. However, his presidency was overshadowed by the Watergate scandal, which ultimately led to his resignation, making him the only president to resign from office. Gerald R. Ford, the 38th president, assumed office after Nixon's resignation and worked to restore trust in government institutions, famously declaring, "Our long national nightmare is over." His pardon of Nixon was a controversial decision, but aimed to heal the nation and move forward from the trauma of Watergate. James Jimmy Carter, the 39th president, prioritized human rights and diplomacy during his presidency, playing a key role in brokering the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt. However, his administration struggled with economic challenges, including stagflation and the energy crisis, which overshadowed his foreign policy achievements. Ronald Reagan, the 40th president, is known for his conservative economic policies, commonly referred to as Reaganomics, which focused on tax cuts, deregulation, and reducing government spending. His presidency also saw a significant military buildup, diplomatic efforts to end the Cold War, and the successful implementation of supply-side economics, leading to a period of sustained economic growth known as the Reagan Revolution. George H.W. Bush, the 41st president, is remembered for his leadership during a time of significant international change, including the end of the Cold War and the Gulf War. His diplomatic skills helped navigate the complexities of the post-Cold War era, fostering a more peaceful global environment. William J. Clinton, the 42nd president, presided over a period of economic prosperity and technological innovation, with policies such as welfare reform and budget surpluses. His presidency was also marked by significant social and cultural changes, including the passage of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, and the implementation of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy regarding LGBTQ+ individuals in the military. George W. Bush, the 43rd president, faced the challenges of the September 11th terrorist attacks and initiated the War on Terror, leading military interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq. His domestic agenda included tax cuts, education reform through the No Child Left Behind Act, and the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. Barack Obama, the 44th president, made history as the first African-American president and is known for his landmark health care reform, the Affordable Care Act, ACA, often referred to as Obamacare. He also implemented economic stimulus measures to address the Great Recession and pursued diplomatic efforts to normalize relations with Cuba and negotiate the Iran nuclear deal. Donald Trump, the 45th president, pursued an America First agenda, prioritizing domestic interests and implementing tax cuts, deregulation, and conservative judicial appointments. His presidency was characterized by a tumultuous political climate, marked by divisive rhetoric, controversial policies on immigration and trade, and 2 impeachments. Joe Biden, the current president, has focused on addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, implementing vaccination efforts, and passing economic stimulus measures to support recovery. His administration has also prioritized climate change initiatives, infrastructure reform, and social justice reforms, aiming to unite a divided nation and tackle pressing domestic and global challenges.